Excellent. So a reminder of where we're at. We basically just started and made ourselves a new project called main2. In that main2, we made ourselves an apps file called second app. And kind of here's the structure. So main2, inside of apps file, we have this second app. That second app, we've already added our URLs, and those URLs can load ourselves an index and pass in a context dictionary to that index, finally allowing us to render this nice page where blob@gmail is one variable under the key of email, and Mike is a second variable that's getting passed to our template and being rendered by the Django rendering engine with the key of name. Excellent. All right, so what we want to do now is basically make ourselves a URL that can say go to users 123 or whatever number we pass in here. So this can be a variable that can be changed. And so where this becomes really useful is if you go and get stuff from a database, which is what we're going to be moving towards shortly here, where we can take this and say, hey, go get whatever that thing is, that product by its ID number, or that person by their ID number, and be able to reference it. And this is a number that we want our user to be able to see. Whoops. Great. So let's go ahead and play around and see if we can get that user's URL made, and then pass in a variable that we can catch and read, and maybe print out on a screen. Cool. So going over to Atom. So we have this base route. So basically it says, hey, if something matches empty, go and run views index. Let's make ourselves a new route. So with regex, we can catch things. We can catch perfect matches. So let's just do that for now, users. And then we can also pass in these keyword arguments. So after the slash, we wanted to catch a parameter, right? So we want to catch this route parameter. So question mark P creates this keyword argument, and let's just call it ID for this one. Excellent. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to catch a regex string. And so remember, this is all a regex pattern. And we want to say, well, whatever match is, we want users slash, and then whatever we're going to put here, the ID, and then backslash for this one, D plus. So we're going to say catch any number of numbers after to create this named route, and then end. So if a string is matching something like quote slash users slash 4,000 or some large number, this thing should catch it. So it should be able to catch any number of numbers after this slash. And then as long as the string ends as the next statement. So it wouldn't necessarily catch, well, it wouldn't catch something that said blah afterwards. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and see how this behaves. Obviously, we need to have some sort of controller method be running. So views.show, let's call that. And let's go off and make ourselves a views.show. All right, so here's our index. Pretty exciting. All right, I'm just going to copy that. And the cool thing about these route parameters, it's a lot like Flask in that the request object gets passed in, which you don't see in Flask, but it does. And then whatever that keyword argument that gets passed in this case ID, so remember it was something like question mark P, oops, and then these braces, and then we had ID inside that. So this name matches that. All right, cool. All right, so let's just change our context object. Instead of being email and name, let's just call it ID, and then ID. So we're going to pass in whatever we get through here as a number. And rather than going to index.html, let's go to show.html. All right, so we need to go to template second app index or second app show.html, new file, show.html, and we're just going to load that view, and we're going to say h1 future user, and we're going to say something like I bet, rather than passing in this ID, which we're going to pass in and try to reference, because that context object, remember, gets decoupled. So that context object that we're showing right here, this guy right here, the keys become parameters that we can use in the Django rendering engine. So I bet rather than passing in this ID, we could eventually go to a database and basically have this ID be returned, instead of this ID being returned, maybe return something that was a result of a SQL statement, something like a user based on a SQL statement that is equivalent to select star from users where ID equals ID. So that's kind of where we're going with this thing, and that's one of the major uses of having these optional parameters. Another optional parameter, as we kind of mentioned in the text, is that, for example, when you look up Django documentation, all of those 1.9, 1.8, 1.7, etc., those are probably parameters that are being caught and then being passed in and telling us which documents that we're actually looking at. So let's go ahead and take a look at this thing. All right, so go ahead and start our server back up just to make sure I know where I am. So there's manage.py in our main2 application, or in our main2 project. All right, so Python manage.py run server. Great. Now let's go ahead and look at home. Great, that's working fine. Now users by itself shouldn't work, right? Because that doesn't actually match anything. We actually do need to have a number here. Great. And so this 15 is what's getting populated there and there. And if we put in a string, because we had that D plus, so we said it had to be numbers, so that's not going to work either. So because of this URL route, it said users, and then the ID is going to match just numbers and any number of numbers. Awesome. So go forth and play with that. And there's one last thing that we're going to talk about in the next video, but we're just going to continue on with this particular project rather than rebuilding a whole project. And that is going to be passing in static files. And so statics get added very similarly to how templates get added. So those dynamic files that get rendered. So we're going to do that in a second. All right.